Assets that may not look valuable to users may be valuable to the attackers as a stepping stone to the actual targets. Mistakes with design, implementation, and configuration are inevitable. They become vulnerabilities that can be exploited. Even billion-dollar companies can't get it right. We inherit the problems of various products as parts of a complex networked system. Whether vulnerabilities can be exploited depends on the next two conditions: threat accessibility and capability. The only aspect that we can truly mitigate is threat accessibility through better system design. The attack life cycle starts off with information gathering to establish the value of targets and weaknesses. The final stage of attack will impact safety, confidentiality, integrity, and availability depending on the objectives of the adversaries. The offensive stages can progress with increasing severity via the client zone, or it can become an incident when attackers directly compromise the networks, servers, or services. Remote threat actors will steal existing credentials or sessions so as to remain undetected, while rogue insiders can act within the same network simultaneously. The challenge is to differentiate the two types of actors within a complex network. We need to identify the critical functions and data sets, move them out of band in ways without impacting usability, and to use deception and moving target defense to our advantage. We also need to shift away from delivering use cases at the expense of security, to address threat accessibility with respect to prevailing tactics, techniques, and procedures as part of our system design. Tactics are the sub-objectives that require techniques. Techniques are the specific methods targeted at various subsystems or targets. Procedure is the sequence of techniques that are used together to achieve the tactics. There are various offensive tactics related to each stage. Regardless of client or server zones, payloads need to be delivered to the attack surface of the targeted machines or devices, either logically or physically, so as to execute malicious actions related to other tactics, such as installing a backdoor, or gain remote command and control. Once external C2 is established, the attacker will continue with stage 3 and 4 tactics. Both remote threat actors and insiders can operate within the last two stages. We devised an easy-to-follow code execution model. Most systems will execute codes with compiled binary files, which we termed as Type 1. Scripting or indirect code execution using built-in system and application tools are termed as Type 2. The first two types are based on system features, but Type 3 exploits bugs to execute arbitrary codes. Compile codes can vary infinitely. It is impossible to keep track with signature-based approach. We use an automated approach that is based on file ownership. All valid deployed system and applications files should be owned by system, trusted installer, or administrators group. Otherwise, files can be overwritten and become a backdoor. We use an agent that automatically terminates processes related to Type 1 code execution. The same approach can be applied to non-Windows operating systems. Type 2 code execution is also known as living off the land, because it does not require any foreign compiled executable files. Type 3 tend to be malformed content files, but it is also possible to deliver payloads through hardware interfaces, network packets to exploit vulnerable network services or APIs. Type 2 code execution is mitigated by configuration hardening and functionalities reduction within the host or device. To discover and hunt Type 2 and 3 effectively, we need end-to-end visibility that links user activities to processes to network sessions. We also use algorithms to group similar command line parameters to narrow down unusual processes. Since insiders can also abuse system tools to perform malicious actions, we devised a user action tracking technique to differentiate malicious background processes from interactive processes that are used by the insider. Most of the client-side infiltrations are related to internet access. Even with various code execution mitigations described earlier, the attackers just need to get it right once to achieve remote C2. By using disposable internet kiosks or remote browsers, offensive tactics related to payload delivery, code execution, backdoor installation, and remote C2 becomes irrelevant, because it will be contained within the disposable operating environment. Users can safely review external contents. CDR and one-way data flow support external content transfer into the internal networks. Well-designed deception is only visible to the remote actors. We use them within the zones to reliably differentiate threat actor types. Our approach to Zero Trust Client Zone combines end-to-end visibility from user actions to processes to network sessions to increase the cost of attack and achieve early threat detection and response. Application and server vulnerabilities, together with most database systems, are a recipe for data breaches. As long as application layers or database tools on the servers can access the data within these systems, vulnerabilities in the forms of logic flaws and poor configurations will be exploited. It is just a matter of time. Breach-safe approach partitions the database schema in such a way that use cases like online shopping can be realized without storing any personal identifiable information within the low trust zone. In the example illustrated here, the users do not even need passwords to complete the transactions. We deploy decoy data tables within the low trust database to trap attackers to achieve reliable detection. Conventional approach depends on weak controls like firewalls or web application firewalls at the perimeters. Decision makers often limit their budget only to critical assets while ignoring the paths to those assets. Marketeers further confuse users with phrases like attacks are evolving when the reality is attackers are evasive. For instance, payloads can be easily mutated to bypass controls like web application firewalls. The tactics did not change. It is still payload delivery which leads to code execution, regardless server or client zone. Breach-safe and zero-trust client approaches are two reusable architecture patterns to address both the server and client zones respectively. The attack lifecycle approach deals with threat accessibility at a tactical level, instead of trying to block or detect limited set of techniques. At the server side, even when attackers are able to fully access the low trust zone, there is no data that can be related to the users of the system. They are detected early and reliably by means of deception in the form of decoy tables that look like conventional data schema. Regardless of offensive techniques, the access to these decoys are tracked in real time, while the rest of the operational tables are tracked selectively to balance security and performance needs. The development of detection is also greatly simplified. At the client zone, automated reboot of disposable internet kiosks is a form of moving target defense that gives us quick recovery and response. The barrier to enter the internal zones is high. Internal zone deception and end-to-end visibility allow us to quickly discern between insiders from remote threat actors. The shift of focus towards threat accessibility is part of a paradigm shift. We have not seen much success from trying to write better codes to address vulnerabilities for decades. We then repeat the same problems to mobile and Internet of Things devices. Industry players try to address the problems at a technique level, and users are overwhelmed with choices of products to patch flawed architectures. The two proposed architecture patterns will simplify networks that are resilient and dynamic. We move away from tit-for-tat controls to moving target and deceptive defense to provide holistic protection and early threat response.